The shackles around my wrists weighed 14 pounds each. I knew because the Veshan guard who locked them told me, smiling with all 3 rows of teeth as he did it. He said it like he was doing me a favor, like knowing the exact weight of the thing holding me down would somehow make it easier to carry. It did not. I stood in the center of the resonance chamber, a vast amphitheater carved into the core of the Axis Tribunal Station, and every seat in that enormous space was filled with something that wanted me dead, not figuratively, literally. The Kale delegation occupied the upper gallery, their amphibious bodies glistening under the chamber lights, and every single one of them was making the low gurgling sound their species produced when they were calling for blood. The Veshan legislators filled the middle tiers, their insectoid wings folded tight against their backs, mandibles clicking in what passed for judicial commentary. And above them all, on 3 elevated platforms that looked like thrones carved from the bones of the station itself, sat the chief arbiters. 3 species, 3 judges, 1 human standing alone on the floor below them, and not a single friendly face in the room. My name is Declan Voss. I haul cargo for a living. Industrial solvents, mining equipment, agricultural compounds. Boring stuff, legal stuff. I run a freighter called the Blackjack Meridian, and I have been doing this for 11 years without so much as a parking violation on my record. And yet somehow, according to the formal charges being read aloud by the Veshan chief prosecutor, I had single-handedly destroyed a Kyle sacred harvesting colony on the moon of Rathara 4, killing 1,200 civilians in the process. 1,200. They kept repeating that number like it was a blade they could push deeper with every mention. The chief prosecutor was a tall Veshan named Chetan, and she read the charges with the kind of mechanical precision that made it clear she had already decided the outcome. Ship transponder signature matching the Blackjack Meridian. Sensor logs from 3 separate relay stations placing my vessel in the Rathara system during the attack window. Debris analysis showing engine residue consistent with a human-manufactured drive core. Every piece of it was wrong. Every single piece. But the evidence had been assembled with care, stacked neatly like bricks in a wall, and the wall was built to bury me. I was 3 systems away when that colony burned. I was hauling 40 tons of industrial solvent to a mining operation on Pellic Station, and I had the delivery manifest to prove it. But manifests were human documents, and human documents carried no weight in this court. My transponder had been cloned. Someone had copied my ship's signature and used it to mask their own vessel during the attack, and the Conclave's investigation had stopped the moment they found a match. Why dig deeper when you already have a convenient answer, especially when the convenient answer is a human? Humans were new out here, 60 years since first contact, barely 2 generations of interstellar presence, and we had no political allies, no trade leverage, no species council backing. We were tolerated, occasionally useful, easily blamed. My appointed legal advocate was a young Veshan named Suvan, and she stood beside me looking like she might collapse at any moment. Her wings trembled against her back, her compound eyes kept darting toward the exits. She had been assigned to me because no one else would take the case, and she had made it clear within the first 5 minutes of our meeting that no human had ever been acquitted in this court. Not once. Not in the entire history of human participation in conclave proceedings. She leaned close to me now, her mandibles barely moving as she whispered, "Declan, the preliminary vote has already been taken among the gallery observers. 94% favor immediate conviction. The arbiters will not go against that kind of consensus. They are supposed to judge evidence, not popularity," I said. "You are describing a system that does not exist," she replied. The Kale trade speaker rose from the upper gallery. His name was Vren Salo, a massive amphibian with skin the color of deep ocean water and eyes that reflected light like polished stones. He descended to the presentation floor, and as he moved, the chamber fell into the kind of silence that only comes when everyone in a room agrees on what should happen next. He activated the holographic display, and the chamber filled with images of the destroyed colony. Buildings torn apart, craters where homes had been, and then the dead, Kale bodies, broken and burned, displayed in rotating 3-dimensional detail for every delegate in the room to absorb. I kept my eyes on the images. I owed them that. Even though I did not do this, those people were still dead, and looking away felt like another kind of crime. Vren Salo spoke in the deep, resonant register the Kyle used for formal address. 1,200 souls, farmers, children, elders who had tended those harvest fields for 4 generations. Destroyed in a single night by a human vessel. By this human. He pointed at me, and the gallery erupted. The gurgling from the Kale delegation became a roar. Veshan wings buzzed with agitation. Even the silent Orath observers, crystalline giants who rarely showed emotion, shifted on their platforms. I stood still. I had learned a long time ago that the worst thing you could do in a room full of people who hated you was flinch. The Kale prosecutor, a smaller amphibian named Dorith, stepped forward to support the trade speaker's presentation. He walked the chamber through the sensor evidence, the transponder match, the debris analysis. It was thorough, it was convincing, and it was built on a lie. I knew it was a lie because I knew how transponder cloning worked. I had spent 8 years before becoming a hauler, working as a forensic data analyst on Earth, and later on the colony world of Hargrove. Accident investigations, insurance fraud, cargo theft. I had seen cloned transponders before, and the clone used in this attack was sloppy. The signal decay pattern did not match my ship's engine class. The timestamps had gaps that suggested post-event editing. The debris residue analysis was generic enough to match any of 200 human-manufactured vessels currently operating in that sector. But none of that mattered if no one would listen. I looked up at the 3 chief arbiters. The Veshan arbiter, a gray-winged elder named Prekath, watched the proceedings with the satisfied stillness of someone who had already written the verdict. The Kale arbiter, a female named Ulith Tan, sat rigid with grief and fury, her species dead weighing on her like a physical load. And the Orith arbiter, a crystalline giant named Prism Judge Aloth, watched me with something I had not expected. Curiosity. His body was a lattice of translucent crystal, refracting the chamber lights into slow-moving rainbows across his surface. The Orath did not have faces in any way humans understood, but they communicated through light patterns in their crystalline structures, and Aloth's patterns were calm, measured, thoughtful. He was the only being in that chamber who did not seem to have already decided what I was. I filed that away. It might matter later. The presentations continued. More evidence, more images, more carefully constructed certainty. And through all of it, I kept my breathing steady, my posture straight, and my eyes open. Not because I was brave, because I was angry, deeply, quietly angry. The kind of anger that does not burn hot but sits cold in your chest like a stone, waiting. Then I noticed something that changed everything. Behind the arbiter's platforms, partially concealed by the ceremonial drapery that decorated the chamber walls, stood the Pillar of Amaran. I had read about it in the briefing materials Suvin provided, though she had dismissed it as decoration. It was a towering obelisk, maybe 40 feet tall, made of material that looked like black stone threaded with veins of gold. Ancient script covered its surface in dense, spiraling patterns that no living species could read. It was a relic of the Amaran precursors, the civilization that had built this station, and much of the galactic infrastructure, before vanishing 11,000 years ago. It was supposed to be inert, dead technology, a monument to something no one remembered. But as Vren Salo described the massacre, as his voice filled the chamber with grief and accusation, I saw something move across the pillar's surface, a faint pulse of light, golden and quick, traveling through the ancient script like a signal through a wire. It was there for less than a second, a flicker, a breath. No one else saw it. Every eye in the room was on the holographic dead or on me. I looked at the pillar, and for a moment, for just a fraction of a heartbeat, I felt something looking back. Then Chetan stepped forward again, her mandibles spread wide in the Veshan expression of formal judgment. The evidence is conclusive. The accused, the human designated Declan Voss, is guilty by preliminary assessment. The conclave demands summary execution in accordance with Rathara Accord statutes governing mass civilian casualties. The chamber roared its approval. Suvin grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong for her slender frame. They will deliberate overnight. That is all the time you have. One cycle. And Declan, I have to be honest with you. I have nothing. I have no defense that will survive this chamber. I looked at her. Then I looked at the Pillar of Amaran, dark and silent behind its curtains. Then we need to find one, I said. They took me back to my cell, and the sound of the chamber's hatred followed me down the corridor like something alive. Suvin came to my cell 3 hours after they locked me in. She looked worse than before, which I had not thought possible. Her wings were pressed so flat against her back that they had lost their color, and the rapid clicking of her mandibles told me she had been arguing with someone, probably herself, for most of those 3 hours. "I need to tell you something," she said, settling onto the narrow bench across from my cot. "And you are not going to like it." "I have not liked anything since I entered this system," I said. "Keep going." She took a breath, or the Veshan equivalent, a slow expansion of the spiracles along her thorax. "This case is political. I suspected it before, but I confirmed it tonight. I accessed the Conclave's internal communication logs, the ones that are supposed to be restricted from defense advocates. They were not particularly careful about hiding them. Political how? The Kale government knows who destroyed that colony. They have known from the beginning." I sat up on my cot. "Say that again." "The Rathara 4 attack was carried out by a Kale dissident faction called the Vethran Compact. They are a splinter group from the Kale's southern trade bloc, and they have been engaged in internal conflict with the ruling trade families for nearly 2 decades. The Kale Intelligence Service had the Vethran Compact under surveillance. They intercepted communications planning the attack 3 days before it happened." The cold stone of anger in my chest grew heavier. They knew it was coming. They let it happen. "Worse," Suvin said. "They could not prevent it without revealing the scope of their intelligence operation against their own citizens, which would have caused a political crisis within the Kale government. So they let it happen, and then they needed someone to blame. Someone outside Kale society. Someone disposable. A human. A human with a ship that operated in the right sector, whose transponder could be cloned without significant effort, and whose species had no political infrastructure to mount a serious defense. She looked at me with those enormous compound eyes, and for the first time, I saw something in them that was not fear. It was shame. They chose you specifically, Declan. Your shipping routes, your lack of connections, your species. You were selected." I stood up and paced the small cell. 4 steps one way, 4 steps back. The gravity restraints on my wrists clinked with each movement. The sensor data, the evidence they presented. "Can we prove it was fabricated?" "Partially, but proving fabrication requires access to the Tribunal's independent sensor archive, the raw, unedited data from the relay stations. That archive is sealed. Only a chief arbiter can authorize access, and no arbiter will risk the political consequences of opening it. The Kale delegation would see it as an act of hostility. The Veshan arbiter will not move against the Kale because of trade dependencies, and the Orath." "Aloth," I said. Suvin hesitated. Prism Judge Aloth is difficult to read. "The Orath do not participate in trade politics the way the other elder species do. They are concerned with older things. History, precedent, structure. But even Aloth will not unilaterally open the archive against the wishes of the other 2 arbiters." I stopped pacing. "Then we need another way." "There is no other way. The Conclave's legal framework does not provide for independent investigation by the defense. The prosecution controls evidence access. The arbiters control procedural authority. And the gallery vote, while technically advisory, has never been overridden in the history of this court." "The pillar," I said. Suvin stared at me. "What?" "The pillar of Amaran. In the chamber. Behind the platforms. Tell me about it." Her mandibles clicked in confusion. "It is a relic. Decorative. It has been dormant for over 11,000 years, since the Amaran precursors disappeared. Why are you asking about this?" "I saw something during the hearing. A light, moving through the script on its surface. Just for a moment." Suvin's wings lifted slightly, an involuntary reflex. "That is not possible. The pillar has been studied by every major species in the Conclave. There is no active energy source within it. Whatever you saw was a reflection." "It was not a reflection. She studied me for a long time." Then she spoke carefully. "There are legends about the pillar, old legends, from before the current Conclave structure existed. The Amaran precursors supposedly used it as a truth engine, a device for adjudicating disputes. The stories say it could perceive deception, read intent, and deliver absolute judgment. But these are myths, cultural artifacts from species that encountered the Amaran thousands of years ago and built stories around technology they could not understand. What happens if it activates? I asked. According to the oldest conclave charter, the foundational document that predates every current legal framework, the pillar's judgment supersedes all tribunal authority. If the pillar designates a verdict, no arbiter, no gallery vote, and no species delegation can override it. She paused. But this is entirely theoretical. It has never activated, not once in the recorded history of any living species. What would trigger it? No one knows. The Amaran left no operating manual. Some Orath scholars theorize it responds to specific harmonic frequencies. Others believe it requires a biological key, a specific genetic pattern. The dominant theory is that it is simply dead technology that will never function again. I placed my hand flat against the wall of my cell. The wall that faced toward the resonance chamber, toward the pillar. I felt it again, that low vibration, rhythmic and deep, pulsing through the metal like a heartbeat. It was faint enough that I could have imagined it, but I was not imagining it. I knew the difference between sensation and hope, and this was sensation. It is not dead, I said quietly. Suvin watched me, and I could see the conflict in her body language, the scientific skepticism of her species warring with the evidence of my certainty. Even if you are right, Declan, even if the pillar is somehow active, you cannot base a legal defense on an 11,000-year-old artifact that no one understands. The arbiters will dismiss it. The gallery will think you are deranged. I am not going to base my defense on the pillar. Then what are you going to do? I pulled the data tablet she had brought me during our first meeting and opened the sensor logs from the prosecution's evidence package. You got me access to the raw data from the relay stations, the prosecution's version. I want to walk through it with you. Why? We already know it was fabricated. Because fabrication leaves fingerprints, and I spent 8 years reading fingerprints. For the next 4 hours, Suvin and I went through the sensor data, line by line. She was not a forensic analyst, but she was smart, and once she understood what I was looking for, she caught things I might have missed. The Veshan processed visual data faster than humans, and her compound eyes could track multiple data streams simultaneously. The timestamps were the first problem. The relay stations that supposedly tracked my transponder through the Rathara system used a synchronized time protocol maintained by the Conclave. Each station pinged a central clock every 12 seconds. The prosecution's logs showed my transponder moving through the system in a smooth, continuous trajectory. But when I compared the timestamp intervals, I found gaps. Small ones, just fractions of a second, but consistent. Someone had edited the logs after the fact, inserting my transponder data into a timeline that originally contained a different signature, and the editing process had introduced microgaps in the synchronization protocol. The engine residue analysis was the second problem. Human-manufactured drive cores all used a variant of the same fusion containment design, and the residue they left was chemically similar. But similar was not identical. My ship, the Blackjack Meridian, ran a Hargrove-Patterson Mark IV drive core. The residue profile for a Mark IV included a specific ratio of helium-3 isotopes that was different from, say, a Consolidated Dynamics Series 9 or a Langtech Borealis. The prosecution's debris analysis had used a generic human drive signature without specifying the core type. It matched my ship the same way it matched 200 other vessels. The transponder decay was the third problem, and the most damning for the prosecution's case. Every transponder signal degraded over distance, in a pattern determined by the broadcasting ship's power output and hull geometry. My ship was a converted cargo hauler with a flat, wide hull profile. The transponder signal recorded by the relay stations showed a decay pattern consistent with a narrow, angular hull, more like a fast courier or a military scout. This was not even a good forgery, I said, staring at the data on my tablet. Whoever cloned my transponder did not bother to match the decay signature. They just copied the identification code and broadcast it from a completely different ship. Which means the original sensor data, the data in the sealed archive, should still show the real ship's profile underneath the cloned code, Suvin said, her mandibles clicking rapidly as the implications settled in. If we could access it, we could identify the actual vessel. Which is why they sealed the archive. Which is why they sealed the archive, she repeated. We sat in silence for a moment. The vibration in the wall continued its slow, steady pulse. I wondered if Suvin could feel it too, but she gave no indication. There is one more option, she said eventually. I found it while searching the Conclave Charter for anything that might help. It is buried deep in the oldest sections of the foundational law, the right of personal testimony. What is it? The accused may present evidence directly to the chamber, without advocate filter. You would speak for yourself, present your findings, and submit them as direct testimony. That sounds like exactly what I need. It is also a death sentence. The right of personal testimony removes all legal protection. If the chamber does not accept your testimony, execution is immediate. There is no appeal, no delay, no second deliberation. You speak, and they either believe you or they end you. I looked at her. Suvin, they are going to execute me anyway. The preliminary vote is 94%. The evidence is fabricated, and no one with the authority to investigate it will do so. The only thing the right of personal testimony costs me is time, and I am almost out of that. She did not argue. She could not. We both knew the math. I lay back on my cot and stared at the ceiling of my cell. The vibration in the wall pulsed against my shoulder blade, and I thought about my mother. She had raised me on Hargrove Colony after my father died in a mining accident when I was 6. She worked double shifts at the processing plant, and still made time every evening to sit with me and talk about the day. And the thing she said more than anything else, the thing she drilled into me until it was part of my bones, was this. You do not let the lie stand. Ever, even when the truth costs you, especially when the truth costs you. I closed my eyes. In 7 hours, the chamber would reconvene, the arbiters would announce their deliberation, and I would invoke the right of personal testimony and bet my life on evidence that a room full of hostile aliens would not want to hear. But first, I would sleep, because whatever happened tomorrow, I needed to be sharp, and exhaustion was a luxury I could not afford. The vibration pulsed, slow, steady, patient, like something waiting. The resonance chamber was full again when they brought me in, but the energy was different this time. Yesterday had been grief and fury. Today was hunger. The gallery wanted a conclusion, and they wanted it fast. I walked to the center of the floor, the gravity restraints heavy on my wrists, and looked up at the tiers of seats rising above me like the walls of a pit. Every species in the conclave had sent observers. I recognized Veshan wings, Kale amphibious bodies, the translucent crystal forms of the Orath, and dozens of others I could not immediately identify. Smaller species, newer species, species who had no vote but wanted to witness the spectacle. A human being judged, a human being condemned. That was entertainment out here. Suvin took her position beside me, her data tablet clutched against her thorax like a shield. She had spent the remaining hours of the night preparing a formal brief outlining the forensic irregularities I had identified, structured in the precise legalistic format the conclave required. It was good work, clear, thorough, and completely useless if no one read it. The 3 chief arbiters took their platforms. Prekith, the Veshan arbiter, settled with the particular stillness of someone about to deliver bad news they were comfortable with. Ulith Tan, the Kale arbiter, radiated cold satisfaction. And Aloth, the Orath, watched the proceedings with that same quiet curiosity I had noticed the day before. Prekith spoke first. The tribunal has deliberated. On the matter of the destruction of the Kale harvesting colony on Rethara 4 and the deaths of 1,200 Kale civilians, the preliminary assessment of the tribunal is as follows. She paused for effect. Guilt is affirmed by majority assessment. The accused, the human Declan Voss, is found complicit in the attack by evidence of transponder presence, sensor corroboration, and debris analysis. The tribunal recommends sentencing in accordance with Rethara Accord statutes. The gallery erupted. Applause, if you could call it that. Each species had its own way of expressing approval, and the combined sound was like being inside a machine that was tearing itself apart. Vren Salo rose from the Kale gallery, his deep blue skin darkened with what I assumed was satisfaction. The Kale delegation calls for immediate execution, as is our right under the Rethara Accord. The evidence is clear. The crime is established. Let justice be served without further delay. I watched him. His movements were confident, expansive, the body language of a being who had won and knew it. But there was something else underneath, a tightness around his eyes, a slight rigidity in his posture, that told me he wanted this over fast. Not because justice demanded speed, but because time was his enemy. The longer this dragged on, the more chance someone might look where he did not want them to look. Prekath turned her compound eyes toward me. The accused may speak before sentencing. I invoke the right of personal testimony, I said. The chamber went silent. Not the gradual fading of noise that happens when a crowd loses interest. This was instantaneous, like someone had cut the sound feed. Prekath's mandibles froze mid-motion. Ulithtan's eyes widened. Even the gallery observers stopped moving. Suvin, standing beside me, took a single step back. We had agreed on this, but hearing me say it out loud clearly hit different than discussing it in a cell. Prekath recovered first. The accused invokes the right of personal testimony. This is his privilege under foundational conclave law. The chamber is reminded that under this provision, all legal protections are removed. The accused speaks directly, presents evidence directly, and bears the full consequence of the chamber's judgment without appeal. She looked at me with an expression I could not fully read. Declan Voss, do you understand what you have invoked? If this chamber does not accept your testimony, the sentence will be carried out immediately. I understand, I said. Then speak. I looked around the chamber. Hundreds of alien eyes, alien sensors, alien attention, all focused on a single human standing in a pit. No allies, no backup, no safety net. I spoke. My name is Declan Voss. I am a cargo hauler. I have operated in this sector for 11 years, and in that time I have made over 400 deliveries to stations and colonies belonging to 14 different species, including the Kale. I have never committed an act of violence. I have never damaged property. I have never caused harm to any living being of any species, and I did not destroy the colony on Rathara 4. The gallery stirred. Vrensalo's eyes narrowed. The evidence against me consists of 3 elements: a transponder match, sensor logs from relay stations, and debris analysis. I will address each one. I took a breath. The gravity restraints pulled at my wrists, but I kept my hands still. First, the transponder match. My ship, the Blackjack Meridian, broadcasts a standard identification code on all conclave-recognized frequencies. This code was cloned, copied, and rebroadcast by another vessel to mask its identity during the attack. Transponder cloning is a known technique used in cargo theft, piracy, and military deception throughout this sector. It is not difficult, it is not sophisticated, and it is not proof of my presence at Rathara 4. Dorith, the Kale prosecutor, stood. The transponder match is confirmed by 3 independent relay stations. The accused cannot simply claim cloning without evidence. I have evidence, I said. The transponder signal recorded by the relay stations shows a decay pattern inconsistent with my vessel. Every ship broadcasts a signal that degrades over distance, according to the ship's power output and hull geometry. The Blackjack Meridian has a flat, wide cargo hull that produces a specific decay curve. The signal in the prosecution's evidence shows a decay pattern consistent with a narrow, angular hull profile, likely a fast courier or scout-class vessel. The prosecution either did not check this or chose not to disclose it. I saw Dorith hesitate, a tiny flinch, barely visible unless you were watching for it. But I was watching for it. Second, the sensor logs. The relay stations in the Rathara system use a synchronized time protocol that pings a central clock every 12 seconds. The prosecution's logs show a smooth, continuous track of my transponder through the system. But the timestamp intervals contain microgaps, fractions of a second where the synchronization protocol stutters. These gaps are consistent with post-event editing, specifically with the insertion of fabricated data into a timeline that originally contained a different transponder signature. The gallery was quiet now, not supportive. Not convinced, but quiet. Third, the debris analysis. The prosecution's report identifies engine residue consistent with a human-manufactured drive core. This is accurate as far as it goes. But human drive cores come in dozens of variants, each with a distinct isotope ratio in their fusion residue. My ship runs a Hargrove-Patterson Mark IV. The prosecution's analysis does not specify which type of human drive core produced the residue. It uses a generic signature that could match any of 200 human vessels currently operating in this sector. I let that sit for a moment. Then I pushed forward. These irregularities are not coincidental. They are the fingerprints of a deliberate fabrication. Someone cloned my transponder, edited the sensor logs to place me at the scene, and used a generic debris analysis to avoid the specificity that would reveal the deception. This was planned, this was executed, and the Conclave's investigation stopped the moment they found a convenient match, because the convenient match was a human, and humans are easy to blame. The Kale delegation was making that low gurgling sound again, but it was different now, angrier, more urgent. Vren Salo stood, his bulk casting a shadow across the presentation floor. "These are the desperate fabrications of a guilty creature," he said. "The accused is not a forensic expert. He is a cargo hauler grasping at technical jargon to confuse this chamber. I spent 8 years as a forensic data analyst before I became a hauler," I said. "Accident investigations, insurance fraud, cargo theft. I have examined more than 300 cases involving falsified sensor data. I know what edited timestamps look like. I know what cloned transponders produce. And I know what happens when an investigation is designed to find a predetermined answer instead of the truth." The chamber buzzed. Suvin, behind me, was transmitting my forensic brief to every delegate's data terminal. I saw mandibles clicking as Veshan observers read the analysis. I saw Orath crystalline patterns shift as they processed the information. Then I did the thing that would either save me or get me killed faster. "The Kale government knows who destroyed that colony," I said. "They have known from the beginning." The silence that followed was not the silence of surprise. It was the silence of a room holding its breath before an explosion. The attack on Rathara 4 was carried out by a Kale dissident faction called the Vethran Compact, a splinter group from the Kale Southern Trade Bloc that has been in conflict with the ruling trade families for nearly 2 decades. The Kale Intelligence Service had the Vethran Compact under surveillance. They intercepted communications planning the attack before it happened, and they did nothing. Vren Salo's composure broke. Not dramatically, not with shouting or physical movement, but with something worse. His skin color shifted, darkening from deep blue to almost black, and his eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that told me everything I needed to know. He was not angry because I was lying. He was angry because I was right. "This is outrageous," he said, his voice dropping into the lowest register of Kale speech, the one they used for threats. "The accused is fabricating conspiracy theories to distract from his own guilt. The Conclave cannot permit this slander against a member species." "Then open the independent sensor archive," I said. "The raw data, unedited. Let a neutral forensic team examine it. If I am wrong, the archive will prove it, and you can execute me with a clean conscience. If I am right, the archive will show the real ship's transponder signature underneath my cloned code, and this tribunal will have to confront the truth it was designed to avoid." Vren Salo turned to the arbiters. "I formally object. The archive is sealed by tribunal protocol. The defense has no standing to demand its release." Ulith Tan, the Kale arbiter, nodded. "The objection is sustained. The archive remains sealed." Preketh, the Veshan arbiter, clicked her mandibles in agreement. "The defense's claims are noted, but do not constitute sufficient grounds for archive release." I looked at Aloth. The Orath arbiter had not spoken. His crystalline body was cycling through slow patterns of blue and gold light, and he was watching me with the focused attention of a being who was thinking very carefully about what he was seeing. "Prism Judge Aloth," I said, "you have been silent. Do you concur with the other arbiters?" It was a breach of protocol. The accused did not directly address individual arbiters, but protocol had been breached the moment they fabricated evidence to frame me, and I was past caring about etiquette. Aloth's light patterns shifted. When he spoke, his voice was like glass chiming against glass, clear and cold and precise. "I note procedural incompleteness in the prosecution's evidence. However, I do not have sufficient grounds to unilaterally override the tribunal's sealed archive protocol. He paused. The chamber waited. I also note, Aloth continued, that the Foundational Charter provides for extraordinary review in cases where the integrity of the evidence is materially challenged. The accused has presented specific, technical objections that have not been rebutted by the prosecution. This is noteworthy. It was not agreement, it was not support, but it was a crack in the wall, and I saw Vren Salo see it too. The trade speaker stepped forward, his body language shifting from outrage to something more controlled, more dangerous. The chamber has heard enough. The accused has presented no new evidence, only speculation and accusation. I call for an immediate vote on sentencing. And then, the Pillar of Amaran activated. It did not start with light this time. It started with sound. A deep, harmonic tone that seemed to come from everywhere at once. From the walls, from the floor, from inside my own chest. It was not loud, but it was pervasive. A vibration that bypassed the ears entirely and settled into the bones. Every being in the chamber felt it. I saw Veshan wings snap open involuntarily. I saw Kale bodies lock rigid. I saw Oreth crystalline forms begin to resonate, their internal light patterns cascading in response to a frequency they recognized on some fundamental level. The ancient script on the pillar's surface ignited, starting at the base, moving upward in a cascade of liquid gold light. Line after line of precursor writing blazed to life. 11,000 years of silence, and in the span of 5 seconds, every symbol on that towering obelisk was burning. Every being in the resonance chamber froze, not by choice. The sheer impossibility of what they were witnessing overrode every other impulse. The pillar spoke. Not in sound, not in any language that could be recorded or replicated. It was something that arrived directly in the mind, bypassing the mechanisms of hearing entirely. Every species in the room heard it in their own tongue, in their own cognitive framework, shaped to the specific architecture of their consciousness. I heard 2 words. Bearer of justice. The light from the pillar reached toward me. A tendril of golden luminance, coherent and purposeful, extending across the chamber floor like a hand reaching for something it had been searching for. It touched the gravity restraints on my wrists, and they shattered. Not unlocked, not released. Shattered. The 14-pound shackles on each wrist broke apart into fragments that hit the floor like dropped coins. I stood free, and the light did not stop. It moved across my skin, and the ancient script that had been burning on the pillar's surface began appearing on my body, flickering across my arms, my hands, my face like living tattoos written in a language older than every species in the room combined. The chamber was silent in a way I had never experienced. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of awe so complete that it consumed everything else. Then Prism Judge Aloth did something that no one in the chamber had ever seen an Orath do. He descended from his platform, crossed the chamber floor, and dropped to one knee before me. His crystalline body blazed with light, resonating with the pillar's frequency, and his voice when he spoke was barely a whisper. The pillar has chosen. In 11,000 years, across all the species that have stood in this chamber, it has never spoken. Until now. Suvin was beside me, trembling so hard her wings were making a high-pitched humming sound. She gripped my arm with both hands, and her voice cracked when she spoke. "It chose you," she said. "Declan, it chose you." I looked at my hands. The script moved across them in slow, spiraling patterns, warm against my skin, and for one disorienting moment, I felt something I could not name. Not power, not triumph, something deeper, something that felt like recognition. The gallery stared down at me. The Kale delegation was pressed back in their seats, as if pushed by an invisible force. Vren Salo's deep blue skin had gone almost white, and the Pillar of Amaran burned behind me, alive after 11,000 years of silence, its ancient voice still echoing in every mind in the room. Bearer of justice. The chaos lasted exactly 90 seconds. I know because I counted. When the world changes around you in a way you cannot control, counting is the only thing you can do that still makes sense. In those 90 seconds, the gallery went from stunned silence to total upheaval. Veshan delegates launched into rapid-fire debate, their mandibles clashing so fast the sound blurred into a continuous rattle. Chale observers surged toward the exits, then stopped, then turned back, trapped between the instinct to flee and the compulsion to witness. Smaller species pressed against the chamber walls, their varied anatomies registering shock in a dozen different ways. Color changes, body contractions, involuntary vocalizations. Through all of it, I stood in the center of the floor, with golden script moving across my skin, and I tried to understand what had just happened to me. Prism Judge Aloth was still on one knee before me. The other two arbiters had risen from their platforms, and for the first time since this trial began, they looked uncertain. Prakath, the Veshan arbiter, kept glancing between me and the pillar, as if trying to calculate the political implications at a speed her neural architecture was not designed for. Ulithtan, the Kale arbiter, had not moved at all. She sat frozen on her platform, her amphibious eyes fixed on the burning obelisk behind me, and the expression on her face was something close to fear. Aloth rose to his full height. Among the Orath, he was large, nearly 9 feet of crystalline lattice that caught the pillar's light and scattered it across the chamber in 100 fractured rainbows. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight of authority I had not heard from any of the arbiters before. The Pillar of Amaran has spoken. Under foundational conclave law, Article 1 of the Pre-Species Charter, its designation supersedes all tribunal authority. This is not subject to interpretation. It is not subject to vote. It is the oldest law in this structure, and it is absolute. Vrensalo found his voice. He stepped forward from the Kale gallery, and whatever fear he had felt was now buried under layers of political survival instinct. This is a malfunction, a technological anomaly. The pillar is an artifact, a machine. Machines break. Machines can be manipulated. I submit that the human has somehow triggered this event through technical interference. With what? I said. My hands were in shackles. The Orath will not entertain baseless accusations of manipulation, Aloth said, his light patterns hardening into sharp, angular geometries. I have studied the Pillar of Amaran for 347 years. Its crystalline matrix operates on harmonic principles that no living technology can replicate. It cannot be hacked, it cannot be tricked, and it does not malfunction, because it is not a machine in any sense this conclave understands. It is a judgment system, built by a civilization that was ancient before any of our species learned to speak. He turned to face the full chamber, and his voice took on a resonance that felt almost physical, a vibration in the air that commanded attention through something deeper than volume. The Amaran precursors built the pillar for one purpose: to recognize truth spoken in the face of annihilation, not to reward power, not to favor the strong or the clever, to identify the single quality they valued above all others, the willingness to stand alone, outmatched, and demand justice at the cost of everything. The pillar has waited 11,000 years for this moment. It has watched every trial, every hearing, every dispute that has occurred in this chamber. It has remained silent through all of them, until now. He looked at me. The light within his crystalline body was cycling through patterns I had never seen, deep golds and blues that seemed to move with the same rhythm as the script on the pillar's surface. The designation, Bearer of Justice, confers authority under the Pre-Species Charter. It grants the bearer full procedural control over the current proceeding, including access to all sealed evidence, testimony archives, and classified intelligence relevant to the case. The chamber erupted again. The Kale delegation shouted objections. Preketh clicked her mandibles in alarm. But Aloth's voice cut through the noise like a blade through cloth. This is not a suggestion. This is foundational law. Every species that sits in this chamber agreed to it when they joined the conclave. The pillar's authority predates your governments. It predates your civilizations. And it will be honored. The room settled, not because the delegates accepted it, but because they recognized that fighting it would require challenging the very foundation of the structure they were sitting in. I looked at Aloth. I do not want authority, I said. I want the truth. Then use the authority to find it. I turned to face the gallery. The script on my skin pulsed with each heartbeat, and I could feel the pillar behind me like a presence at my back, vast and patient, and impossibly old. I was not comfortable with this. I was a cargo hauler. I analyzed data and moved freight. But I was also standing in a room full of people who had decided I should die for something I did not do, and the only thing that had stopped them was a 40-foot obelisk that had chosen this moment, after 11,000 years, to wake up and say my name. So I used it. 3 demands, I said. First, I require full access to the Tribunal's independent sensor archive, the raw, unedited data from every relay station in the Rithara system for the 30-day period surrounding the attack. No redactions, no filters. Ulith Tan spoke for the first time, her voice tight with controlled fury. The archive contains classified intelligence from multiple conclave species. Releasing it to a human would compromise operational security across 4 sectors. I do not need 4 sectors. I need the Rithara system. 30 days. 1 dataset. Aloth nodded. The archive will be opened. Second, I said, I require the Kale internal intelligence files pertaining to the Vethran Compact, their surveillance reports, intercepted communications, and operational assessments for the 12 months preceding the Rithara 4 attack. The Kale delegation went silent, not the angry silence of outrage, the cold silence of beings watching a wall collapse and calculating whether they could escape the falling debris. Vren Salo's voice was barely controlled. You are asking us to expose classified national security operations. I am asking you to show this chamber what you already know, I said. You can do it voluntarily, or the Pillar's authority can compel it. Either way, those files will be opened. Vren Salo looked at the pillar. Its surface still blazed with golden light, and the harmonic tones still pulsed through the chamber like a living heartbeat. He looked at Aloth, at the other arbiters, at the gallery of delegates who were watching this confrontation, with the rapt attention of beings witnessing something they would talk about for the rest of their lives. Then he looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw the exact moment he realized he had lost. The files will be provided, he said. Each word sounded like it cost him something vital. Third, I said, I require a neutral forensic team, composed of specialists from at least 3 non-Kale species, to re-examine the debris field at Rithara 4, with specific attention to engine residue isotope ratios and hull fragment geometry. That can be arranged, Aloth said. I will personally select the team. I nodded. Then I said something I had not planned, something that came from the part of me that still felt the weight of those holographic images, the dead colonists, the broken buildings, the craters where homes had been. I want to be clear about something, I said, and I made sure every being in the chamber could hear me. The Pillar did not choose me because I wanted power. It did not choose me because I am special, or because humans are better than anyone else in this room. It chose me because I was willing to stand here and tell the truth, when doing so was going to get me killed. That is all. That is the only thing I brought to this chamber that apparently mattered. I paused. 1,200 Kale civilians are dead. That is a tragedy that will not be erased by anything that happens today. Finding the truth will not bring them back. But letting a lie stand in their name, using their deaths to condemn an innocent person while the real perpetrators go free, that is a second crime, and I will not be part of it. The chamber was quiet. Not the hostile silence of the previous days. Something else. Something harder to name. The investigation moved fast after that. Aloth brought in Orath data specialists to open the sensor archive, and within 2 hours, the raw relay station data confirmed what I had suspected. Underneath the cloned transponder signature, the original ship's profile was still visible, encoded in the decay patterns and timing intervals that the forgers had not been able to fully overwrite. The ship was a Kale military courier, registry number KH7741, assigned to the Vethran Compact's operational fleet. The Kale intelligence files, delivered under protest and heavily monitored by Kale security officers, who looked like they wanted to set fire to the data tablets rather than hand them over, confirmed the rest. The Vethran Compact had been planning attacks on rival Kale colonies for years. The Kale Intelligence Service had intercepted communications specifically referencing the Rithara 4 target 3 days before the attack. The decision not to intervene had been made at the highest levels of the Kale trade government. and the order to frame a human for the attack had been issued by Vren Salo himself. When that detail emerged from the intelligence files, the chamber did not erupt. It imploded. The KL delegation fractured along fault lines that had clearly existed for years, but had been held together by political pressure. Junior delegates turned on seniors. Security officers stepped away from their posts. And Vren Salo, standing in the center of the KL gallery with the evidence of his conspiracy displayed on every screen in the chamber, did the one thing I had not expected. He tried to run. Conclave security caught him before he reached the corridor. 2 Veshan guards and an Orath enforcer, their crystalline body blocking the exit like a living wall. They brought him back to the chamber floor, and for the first time since this trial began, the being in restraints was not me. I watched them place the gravity shackles on his wrists, 14 pounds each. I knew the weight. I felt no satisfaction. The truth was out, and it was uglier than even I had expected. A government that had let its own people die to protect a political secret, then framed an outsider to avoid accountability. 1,200 dead, and the people responsible had been sitting in the gallery demanding my execution, while knowing exactly who had pulled the trigger. Suvan stood beside me, her data tablet hanging forgotten at her side. She was staring at the files scrolling across the chamber's holographic displays, the intercepted communications, the operational assessments, the chain of command that led directly to the KL trade speaker's office. "I have been practicing law for 11 years, she said quietly. "I have never seen anything like this." "The corruption or the pillar?" I asked. "Both." The script on my skin was fading. The golden lines that had blazed across my arms and hands were dimming, retreating like a tide going out. I held up my palm and watched the last traces of precursor writing flicker and dissolve, leaving only the faintest ghost of gold in the creases of my skin. Suvan noticed. "It is leaving you." "It was never mine," I said. "It was just using me as a place to stand for a while." Aloth approached us, his massive crystalline form moving with a grace that belied his size. "The forensic team at Rathara 4 has completed its preliminary analysis. The engine residue confirms a KL military drive core, consistent with the courier vessel identified in the sensor archive. The hull fragment geometry matches the KH-7741's design specifications." "So it is done," I said. "The investigation is done. What follows will take considerably longer." He paused, and his light patterns shifted to something that looked almost gentle. "The Conclave will convene a special tribunal to adjudicate the KL government's role in the attack and the subsequent cover-up. Multiple KL officials will face charges. The political ramifications will reshape the Conclave's power structure for decades." "I do not need to be part of that," I said. "No, you do not." He studied me, and I had the strange sense that the Orath was seeing something in me that went beyond the visual spectrum. "But you should understand something, Declan Voss. The pillar did not activate because you were right. Many beings have been right in this chamber. Many have stood where you stood and spoken truths that no one wanted to hear. The pillar remained silent for all of them." "Then why me?" "Because you did not speak the truth to save yourself. You spoke it because you could not bear to let the lie stand. There is a difference, and the pillar knows it. The Amaran did not build it to find the smartest or the most powerful. They built it to find the one who would choose truth over survival. In 11,000 years, across every species that has stood in this chamber, you are the first." I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing. The pillar of Amaran stood behind us, its surface dark again, the golden script dormant. 40 feet of black stone and ancient gold, silent and patient, waiting for whatever came next. It might wait another 11,000 years, or it might wake again tomorrow. I did not think anyone, not even the Orath, could predict which. But for now, it was done. And for the first time in 6 days, I was not standing in a room that wanted me dead. 3 weeks passed. I spent most of them on the Axis Tribunal Station, not because I wanted to, but because the Conclave's bureaucracy required my presence for approximately 400 forms, depositions, and procedural reviews related to my acquittal and the broader Kale investigation. I signed documents in languages I could not read. I gave testimony to committees whose species I could not identify. I sat in waiting rooms designed for beings with anatomies radically different from mine, and tried not to think about how strange my life had become. The station was different now, not physically. The corridors were the same. The lighting was the same. The recycled air tasted the same way it always had, like metal and something faintly botanical that I assumed was the Orath environmental standard. But the beings I passed in those corridors looked at me differently, not with hostility, not with the contempt that humans usually attracted in conclave spaces, with something I could only describe as careful attention, like they were trying to figure out what they were seeing when they looked at me. Species delegations sent formal requests for audiences. The Veshan wanted to discuss diplomatic protocols. The Orath wanted to study the pillar's interaction with my biology. 3 species I had never heard of wanted to establish trade relationships with human merchants. 2 others wanted to discuss military alliances. And the Kale, the ones who were not under investigation, sent a quiet, formal apology through channels that I suspected had not been used in a very long time. I declined most of the requests. I was not a diplomat. I was not a scientist, and I was definitely not a military strategist. I was a cargo hauler who had been framed for a massacre and saved by an artifact that was older than every civilization in the room. None of that qualified me for anything except going back to my ship and doing my job. Aloth visited me in my quarters on the 15th day. The Orath did not knock. They simply appeared, their crystalline bodies refracting the corridor light into a cascade of tiny rainbows that preceded them through the doorway like an announcement. "You are avoiding the delegations," he said. "I am avoiding becoming something I am not." And what is that? A symbol, a weapon, a political tool. I have seen how this works. Every species out there wants to use what happened for their own agenda. The Veshan want a precedent to reform tribunal procedures. The smaller species want proof that the elder races can be held accountable. And everyone wants to know why the pillar chose a human, not because they are curious, but because the answer might give them an advantage. Aloth was silent for a moment. His light patterns cycled through a sequence I had come to associate with deep thought, slow waves of blue and amber that moved through his crystalline lattice like currents in a transparent ocean. "You are perceptive," he said, "and you are correct. The political landscape of the conclave has been fundamentally altered by the pillar's activation, and every faction is trying to navigate the new terrain. But I did not come to discuss politics." "Then why did you come?" "Because you deserve to understand what happened to you. And because the Amaran left behind more than the pillar." He settled himself on the floor of my quarters, which was the Orath equivalent of sitting. His body folded into a compact geometric configuration that somehow managed to look both alien and comfortable. "The Amaran precursors did not vanish," he said. "That is the popular story, but the Orath have always known it was incomplete. The Amaran ascended. They reached a point in their development where physical existence became optional, and they chose to leave it behind. But they did not abandon the galaxy. They left behind tools, instruments, tests." "Tests," I repeated. "The Pillar of Amaran is one of many. There are others, scattered across the galaxy. The Conclave has known about some of them for millennia. We have cataloged their locations, studied their structures, and attempted to activate them using every method available to our combined civilizations. None of them have ever responded. Until now. Until now." Aloth's light patterns intensified. The Amaran were not looking for the most powerful species, or the oldest, or the most technologically advanced. They were looking for something specific, a quality they valued above all others, and they designed their artifacts to recognize it. "And what quality is that?" "You already know. You demonstrated it." I thought about what I had done in the resonance chamber. I had stood up. I had presented evidence. I had accused a powerful species of conspiracy. And I had done it, knowing that it would almost certainly get me killed. "Stubbornness," I said. Aloth made a sound that might have been a laugh, a bright chiming of crystal against crystal. The Orath would call it harmonic integrity. The Amaran had their own term. which does not translate well into any modern language. But the human word stubbornness is remarkably close. Not courage, not wisdom, not some grand moral superiority. No, the Amaran were too sophisticated for that. They knew that courage can be performed, wisdom can be calculated. Moral superiority is often just another form of power. But the willingness to hold to truth when doing so offers no benefit and guarantees punishment that cannot be faked. It cannot be manufactured. It is either in a being or it is not. He paused, and his light patterns settled into something steady and warm. Every species in this conclave has its strengths. The Veshan are brilliant legislators. The Orith have memory that spans centuries. The Kale built trade networks that connected 100 star systems, but none of them produced an individual who would stand in this chamber, shackled and condemned, and demand truth with no expectation of being heard. Your species has existed for a fraction of our history. You have been part of the galactic community for barely a heartbeat, and yet you carry something that the oldest civilizations in this structure have never been able to cultivate. We have spent most of our history fighting ourselves, I said. Our own corruption, our own cruelty, our own lies. We are not good at it. We fail more than we succeed, but we keep doing it. Yes, Aloth said. And that persistence, that refusal to accept injustice, even when it is practiced by your own kind, is the quality the Amaran valued. Not perfection, not righteousness. The willingness to keep fighting the fight, even when you know you cannot win. I looked at my hands. The script was gone. My skin was just skin again. But I could still feel the echo of it, a faint warmth in the places where the golden lines had burned. There will be consequences, Aloth said. The conclave will change, the Kale will be diminished, new alliances will form, and every species in this structure will be watching humanity with new eyes. Some will see an opportunity. Others will see a threat. What do you see? He considered the question for a long time. His crystalline body cycled through pattern after pattern, and I watched the light move through him like thought made visible. I see a species that is not ready for what is coming, he said, but has the right instincts to face it. The conclave formally acquitted me on the 17th day. The ceremony was brief and formal, conducted by all three arbiters, with the gallery filled to capacity and broadcast to every species council in the conclave's jurisdiction. Preketh read the acquittal in her mechanical, precise Veshan diction. Ulith Tan, who had been notably quiet since the Kale intelligence files were opened, added a formal recognition of wrongful prosecution, and Aloth declared the matter of the pillar's designation resolved under foundational law. They offered me a permanent judicial position. Bearer of justice, they said, was not merely a title. It was a role, one that came with authority, resources, and a seat on the tribunal itself. I would have a voice in every proceeding. I would have access to every archive, every intelligence file, every piece of evidence that moved through the conclave's judicial system. I declined. The chamber was quiet when I said it, not surprised exactly, more like they were still learning how to read me. I am a hauler, I said. I have cargo to run. Before I left the station, I went back to the resonance chamber one last time. It was empty now. The gallery seats were dark, the arbiter's platform stood vacant, the holographic displays were off. Without the noise, and the bodies and the fury, the chamber felt like what it really was, a hollow space inside a very old machine, waiting for the next dispute to fill it. The pillar of Amaran stood behind the platforms, half hidden by its ceremonial drapery, dark, silent. The golden script was dormant, the ancient writing invisible against the black stone. It looked like exactly what every species in the conclave had believed it to be for 11,000 years. A dead relic, a monument to something no one remembered. I crossed the chamber floor and stood before it. Up close, the stone had a texture I had not noticed before, not rough, not smooth, but something in between, as if the surface was made of compressed time. I placed my hand flat against it. For a moment, nothing happened. The stone was cool under my palm, inert, exactly what you would expect from an 11,000-year-old artifact that had exhausted whatever energy it had used to save my life. Then the script flickered. A single line of golden text, moving under my palm like something alive, warm and bright and quick. It lasted less than a second. Then it was gone, and the stone was dark again. I stood there for a while, my hand on the pillar, my thoughts moving too fast and too slow at the same time. Then I pulled my hand away and walked out of the chamber. Suvin was waiting for me at the docking bay. She looked different than the terrified young advocate who had stood beside me in that chamber. Her wings were held higher. Her mandibles moved with purpose instead of anxiety. She carried a data tablet loaded with documents, and she held it like it meant something. "I am filing a petition with the Conclave Judiciary Committee," she said. "A proposal to reform tribunal procedures, independent forensic review for all capital cases, mandatory archive access for defense advocates, prohibition of species-based profiling in preliminary investigations." That is a lot of reform. It is necessary reform. What happened to you should never have been possible. The system was built to allow it, and the system needs to change. I looked at her, this young Veshan who had started this case, convinced that nothing she did would matter, and I saw something in her compound eyes that I recognized. Not courage, not wisdom, stubbornness. "You will face resistance," I said. "I am aware. The Kale will fight it. The Veshan judiciary will stall. The process will take years, and they will try to bury it in committee." "I know." "Good," I said. "Then you know what you are getting into, and you are doing it anyway. That is the only way anything changes." She made the Veshan gesture that was closest to a human smile, a slight spreading of the mandibles and a quick flutter of the wings. "You taught me that," she said, "whether you meant to or not." I walked down the docking corridor to the Blackjack Meridian. My ship was exactly where they had impounded it 3 weeks ago, sitting in Bay 17 like a patient old dog waiting for its owner. I ran my hand along the hull as I walked to the boarding ramp, feeling the familiar textures, the patched spots from micrometeorite impacts, the scuffed paint where loading drones had bumped against the cargo bay doors, the subtle hum of the drive core in standby mode. I boarded. The cockpit smelled like recycled air and old coffee, and it was the best smell I had encountered in weeks. I settled into the pilot's chair, powered up the navigation console, and pulled up the sector chart. My comm panel was blinking. Messages. Dozens of them. From human colonies, from Earth, from species I had never heard of. News agencies wanting interviews, diplomatic corps wanting consultations, historians wanting to document the first activation of the Pillar of Amaran in 11,000 years. I looked at the blinking panel for about 3 seconds. Then I closed it. I plotted my course. Pellic Station, 2 systems over. 40 tons of industrial solvent that had been waiting 3 weeks for delivery. My client was probably furious. I would deal with that when I got there. The Blackjack Meridian lifted off the docking bay floor, turned toward the station's exit corridor, and accelerated. Through the cockpit window, I watched the Axis Tribunal station shrink behind me. That enormous structure built around an artifact that had been waiting for 11,000 years to find something worth speaking for. It had found a cargo hauler, a human being with dirt under his fingernails and a half-empty cargo hold, and a mother's voice in his head saying, "You do not let the lie stand." The stars stretched as the drive core spooled up, and I thought about what Aloth had said, that the Amaran were not looking for the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. They were looking for the quality that mattered most, the one that could not be faked, could not be purchased, could not be engineered. The willingness to stand in the fire and tell the truth, even when the fire is going to burn you, even when the truth will not save you, even when every rational calculation says to be quiet and accept what is happening. Humans were good at a lot of things, building, exploring, adapting. But the thing we were best at, the thing we carried in our bones like a genetic instruction manual, was the refusal to surrender to a lie. We had spent our entire history fighting that fight, against our own governments, against our own institutions, against our own nature. We lost more than we won. We failed more than we succeeded. And every single time, we got back up and fought it again. Not because we were brave, not because we were noble, because we could not help it. Because something in us, something stubborn and irrational and deeply, fundamentally human, would not let us stop. The Pillar of Amaran had recognized that. After 11,000 years of watching species come and go, civilizations rise and fall, empires bloom and wither, it had found the thing it was looking for in a cargo hauler who was too stubborn to let a lie stand. I pointed the blackjack meridian toward the stars and flew. Behind me, in a chamber carved into the heart of a station older than human civilization, a pillar of dark stone and ancient gold stood silent and patient, waiting for the next time someone needed it. I hoped it would not have to wait long, but knowing the galaxy, it probably would. That was fine. The pillar was patient, and so were we.